Okay, are we good? Can you all hear me?
Yes, ma'am, I can.
Okay, my apologies. I don't know what happened there. But again, welcome. This is diversity, inclusion, and the current climate in America. Today, I'm joined by two experts in the field, and I think we're going to have a very lively discussion. Joining me today are Mr. Todd Byrd, who is the Executive Director of the Passage2Progress Institute, and he's also a diversity and human resources practitioner, as well as Mr. Nathan T. Edwards. Mr. Nathan T. Edwards is founder of Advantage Wonder Cleaner and Advantage 20X at Advantage Diversified Products Incorporated. So gentlemen, I thank you both for joining me here today for this discussion. Also, I want to give a shout out to a very special young lady, and her name is Darnella Frazier. And Darnella is the person that, because of her action, uh, it sparked a global protest, because Darnella is the young lady that videoed the situation that was going on with George Floyd and his subsequent death at the hands of the police. Darnella, 17 years old, she was walking by and saw this injustice happening, and she filmed it because she felt that people needed to know about this and needed to see what was happening. Darnella, I had hoped she would be able to join us today, but she's going to be okay. She's been getting death threats and hate mail and things of that nature because of the action that she took. But I really applaud her for doing what she did. I wish her well. She's going to be okay, and I told her I'm going to share this video with her afterwards. So shout out to Darnella Frazier for all that she did.
I applaud her as well. I applaud her as well.
Yes.
She did a marvelous job.
And she will appreciate that. And she's just an example of young people who want to see justice and equality happen in this country. And, trying to do something that was right and shed some light on it. What she did has been embraced by the world. So protests are going on all over the world, and I think people are not going to stop until we see things change. And we've already begun to see some things change around the globe because of this particular action. So shout out to her. Now, gentlemen, again, thank you all for being here today. And there's probably not been such blatant expression of racism, inequality, and things of this nature in this country in recent years. People seem to have a feeling, I think, of entitlement, and have been even posting things on social media or confronting people face to face, out in public areas, and it's been pretty chaotic. So one of our purposes today is going to talk about these issues. Not only that, we're going to also talk about some solutions and some things that work, and hopefully people will be able to take from this some lessons and some strategies and approaches that they can use, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's in the community, whether it's in certain organizations. This is something that I feel is very vital and very important, and we want to put a positive on some of the negative things that we've seen going on. So my first question is, this nation has become polarized around issues of race and social justice, even for that matter. So how do you shift, or how do we make that shift from racial polarization that currently exists in this country to a more inclusive society? Share your thoughts on that, Mr. Byrd or Mr. Edwards. Either one of you can take that question.
I'll take a stab at it, but repeat your question, and I understand your question, but it must be clear, because repeat your question once again, if you don't mind.
Okay. This nation has become more polarized around the issue of race and social injustice, for that matter. So how do we make the shift from racial polarization that exists in this country to a more inclusive society?
Well, I think you start with jobs. It's simple, something as simple as a job. It's so funny that back when the Iraq war took place in the Bush cabinet, they sit around a table and Bush Secretary of State says, you know, when we invade Iraq and take over the country, these people are going to be out of a job and they're going to be sitting around having nothing to do. So we got to inject something for them to do in order for them not to create havoc. Well, this is what's going on now where we at in America. No jobs. And the worst part is that in the lesser community, lesser by virtue of money and industry, there are people that they're creating havoc because they have no job, they got nothing to do. And to solve the problem is jobs. And I think that my work and my direction and my future projects can solve some of the problems. The problems are very big. Obviously, we understand that. But it comes down to jobs. It comes down to having people work and feel that they worth something. And when you work and do a job and you're able to do things and move yourself from one spot to another because this other spot is better, then I think that's my answer to it.
Thank you. Ms. Byrd? You got to unmute.
Okay, hear me now?
Yep.
As far as racial polarization, that's been taking place in this country since this country was conceived. I mean, whether it was about Native Americans, they've assigned whether it be racial attributes to a particular community, Jewish communities, Irish communities, all these communities other than the natives who were here in the first place, migrated to this country, and they were treated in such a way that they were dehumanized. When we start talking about racial polarization, I mean, when we look at the arrival of Africans from America, and people often consider them slaves, that is a process that people would transform into a being. And so as they project images, and what I mean by they, media, you know, has a lot to do with it. And so it's a great idea to have different forms of media and media outlets. But when we look back at different races and nationalities, such as the Jewish community, they had exaggerated nose. They did everything they could to dehumanize that group. And even if you go as far as a police officer, we have police officers, and then we have people out here who are actually murdering our citizens. They label them as pigs. And so when you dehumanize a person, females objectify their bodies. When you dehumanize a person, it's easy for people in society to dismiss that as being something that's relative to something that this person is doing or has done, just based on the way that we've been projected. And as much as people would like to disagree with Donald Trump, when he says fake media, it may not be fake as it pertains to him, but as it pertains to us, when you look at shows like Cops and things like that, I mean, they've driven a narrative and it's been profitable. And so I can understand the business aspect of it, but I think right now it's a time in this country, I don't think it's we're being polarized, but I think that we've been placed in a position based on COVID-19 where we're actually all in this together. So when Mr. Edwards talking about jobs, I mean, it's not just African Americans, people who are on welfare, who are lazy. We're talking about how this virus has exposed, opposed to polarizing a lot of things in the disparities that's taking place in the different communities, thereby prompting Me Too, Black Lives Matters, and All Lives Matters. But we should act like all lives matters. That's the impetus behind Black Lives Matters. And so thank you for introducing me as an expert, but I'm far from it. I mean, there's a lot of research out here. It's just a matter of people right now are fed up and they're taking a position and taking some action toward some of the things that's been taking place, again, since the conception of the United States of America.
Thank you. And by the way, for those of you all who are watching this, you can type your questions and your comments in the chat box, and we will get to as many of them as we can, because we want your questions and comments as well. Okay, moving on to the next question, just to sort of add a little more context to what we're doing today. Usually when people hear the term diversity and inclusion, they think of the workplace. However, diversity and inclusion is much broader than that. So I want you both to respond to this question or this statement, that diversity is relational, but inclusion is collaborative. What do you say to that?
Well, diversity, you know, sometimes that word is overblown, overexpressed. And, you know, if we just do the things that we need to do, I'm a true blue Baptist boy from Greenwood, Mississippi. And even there, you know, you get up in the morning, you do a job. That's your focus. If you got nothing to do, the whole system going to break down. And this is what's coming about now, this deterioration of the system, simply because a lot of these people having anything to do. And I'll stick to what I said earlier. I'm a stickler about jobs. I bought a home in 1969 in Harvey, Illinois. And I looked around that city, and this is during the time when the steel mills started going out of business, and the Japanese was importing cheap steel, and it put a lot of people out of work. And so I dedicated myself to try to fill that gap. And little did I know that it was more serious. The most I ever got as far as employing people in the city of Harvey is 23. That's the most employees I was able to muster with my company. But the whole point is that if you drive through communities, just say you're driving through a community and you see construction workers. Construction areas after construction areas, 90% of the people that are fixing the roads, that are fixing the houses, that are fixing the light poles are white. Why is that? Where's the black people? They have no jobs. So this diversity is serious. It must happen, but we just got to bring it down to a simple fact of putting people to work.
Thank you.
I think it's, as Mr. Edwards said, I think the word is pretty much vague and ambiguous. I mean, we need to put some action behind those, because diversity just simply means differences. We're talking about inclusion, you're talking about collaborative efforts, but at the same time, when we're talking about being inclusive, when you look into the workplace or you look into academia, and academia does it best. I mean, we posture, and there's a lot of pontificating going on about the diversity and celebrating diversity, but I think the most important aspect is to respect that diversity. And it's too many people who don't care enough about others that makes this such a challenge. And so a lot of times we really are kind of shallow when we look at it in terms of black and white. How many of us are aware that the U.S. Supreme Court just recently turned over the Native Americans, the Creek Nation, back their land? That was something that took place maybe earlier in this week, or probably later toward the end of the week. And so we almost forget about that group of people as if they're obsolete. They were placed on reservations. They were cut off from viable resources. And we look at what's taking place in those particular communities. And if we had a closer look, it would be horrifying. And so it's not just about African Americans, not just about how women being treated, but how we're being treated as human beings and how we're treating one another as human beings. And the messages that we're receiving, we are in some way or another being tainted by misinformation about different people. And a lot of times, not a lot of times, it's almost become a natural thing where people are quicker to judge than they are to try to get a better understanding of what's going on. And so looking at the brighter side, like I just mentioned about this landslide legislation that just went through the U.S. Supreme Court. But it's a lot of great things going on in this community, I mean, in this country right now, because people got fed up. And now we have movement. And so when I mentioned Me Too, I mean, that's not new. And when women were first brought into the workplace, they withstood that. They thought that was like hazing. They thought it was like part of the process to become part of this great American boys club. And so the thing is, when you see a woman in leadership, why is she looked upon as being bossy opposed to being a great leader? Why do we have terminology when we're saying you're skirting the issue, meaning that, you know, so we have to think about the language we use, and we have to think about words in a more deliberate way. But beyond everything, we have to look at where we place our values. And if our values, generally they're assigned to us, but if everything is rooted in money and not just the dignity of work itself, then that's where things get kind of skewed, because you have class issues, then you have racial issues, then you have gender bias issues. And so there are so many issues we need to try to figure out, or we need to observe and see what's taking place within these movements, because there's a lot of positive things that are taking place. And we definitely need to make sure that we place that out there and put that out there in the media space, and try to advocate for businesses that are creating, that have stellar products and services, opposed to siloing them and to say, well, this is a great Black business, as if they're not just a business. So we're going to look at a Black business or woman business, or please don't say minority, because that means weaker and less than. And again, so I think that we need to have more conversations like this. We need to get into the business space, the academic space, and even in the secondary education space, to try to create a pipeline for people who are seriously interested in change. And change comes with movement, not with just talking about it.
Thank you, thank you. And one of the things that Mr. Edwards touched on just a bit earlier is, and I think Todd, are you still there?
Oh, my camera just.
Yeah, Mr. Edwards also. Let's see if I can bring you back in. What's that?
The host.
I'm the host.
Did I get too passionate? I'm sorry. Calm down.
Okay, let's see what's going on here. There you are. Okay, so one of the things that I think is very important is something that Mr. Edwards touched on a little bit earlier, about when he was in Harvey and he could only muster about 23 people to basically be employed. And I want him to touch on that a little bit more. Mr. Edwards, are you there?
I'm here, but I can't. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. We can't see you, but we can.
I don't know what happened to the camera. It says the host cut me off.
Sorry about that. Let me go back in. Technology can be something, but while we're figuring this out, I just wanted to ask you, when you were talking about starting your company, and you've been pretty successful, I believe, in developing people into leaders in your company. How did you create and maintain that environment of inclusiveness where people feel they belong in your company and that you also position them for success? How are you able to do that?
Well, you know, when you around like-minded people that have a common goal of success, you know, I have a sales organization, and I was brought up under a gentleman by the name of Don Scott, and where it may not make any difference, but he was white. Mm-hmm. And at 19 years old, he was my hero as far as setting the example in the sales industry. And I learned one thing: if I want to be successful, I better emulate somebody that's successful. So I just did whatever I saw him doing, and it worked. And right today, I still do it as far as running the organization, hiring people. It don't matter what color they are. It just matter whether they can be functionable, whether they can help me arrive to my goals. And it's just about putting yourself into what you do and learning that, like I said, being raised in Mississippi, going to church every Sunday, that created a fair play atmosphere in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
That took me from the South, grew up in Chicago. My family moved to Chicago at 11 years old, and from there till now, I've been in this area. So, and I found that Chicago, you talk about diversity. I don't think anybody know that word here in Chicago. I don't think they even understand that word. The way Chicago. So your question of how do I keep that going? How do I be successful? I'm just busy trying to promote people. I'm busy trying to raise people up. The more successful they are, the more successful I am. And so I don't really have time to get into. I teach my staff race, religion, and politics. We ain't got no time for that. We got time for making money, and that's what we do.
I like that. I like that a lot. And I think that if more companies and leaders were vested in growing their people, making their people successful, and building on those individual strengths and providing those opportunities for them to grow, and not so much looking at race, gender, or any of those other things, I think that we would create a more inclusive environment in that way. Now, Mr. Byrd, I know that you have also groomed leaders in many areas. So why don't you tell me a little bit about how you create a culture of diversity and inclusion?
Well, I've held positions that required or expected me to do that as a job, but what I do realize it is a collective effort to make that happen. But I just want to piggyback on what Mr. Evans just said, and I thought about a quote by Maxwell that pretty much sums up what he's pretty much saying, and from what I've observed from watching his leadership approach, people hear your words, but they feel your attitude. And in his space and in his business, and I ran across him quite some time ago, it's just a positive. So it's a lot of grooming, mentoring, things that people would consider soft skills and ways to improve and motivate. I've seen that actually work. So in academia, we've talked about it, and I have not seen it work as well as I've seen it work in his practices based on some of the experiences that I've had. But it's there, it's theories there, it's research there and everything. But in business is where it actually takes place. And so the reason why I even thought about bringing him is that he will bring life to what's actually opposed to professing it. So a lot of us in academia, I must say, I mean, we've researched, we've read, and we've ran across so many bright and brilliant people, but those people in business are the ones that actually make it happen, because what people don't really look at is that their main objective is not to make the money, but it's part of it. But their objective is about empowering people. And so that's what you have to respect about a business person, because they're taking the risk. They're not going to a place where your 401k and your retirement is in place and they're doing all that. That's a lot of work and a lot of forethought. And it's just like in the primitive days, if you don't go out to hunt, you won't eat. And so what I respect about how they do their thing and things in that manner is that you actually see the benefits. You see the fruits of their labor, and more than just someone accomplishing certain things, whether it be degrees or levels of status. And so to me, I just really wanted to piggyback on that. But in my world, we encourage one another. I got a buddy that says iron sharpens iron. And so we have people here, Ms. Williams and you and yourself, that are here that I can see that's on this particular format. But I've worked with some great people over the years, and I've gathered and drawn what I could, and I channeled that, and I tried to put everything that I have learned and things that I have come across myself and try to pour that into the people that we work with. Many times it's young people, but we do affect and impact our colleagues, our peers, and that matters. Again, you know, some people may tend to put on their blinders and say, well, we're just going to focus on this aspect. And so it's good that there's the diversity, there's the differences, because maybe where I fall short, you can make up for the loss, for lack of a better way of putting it. So I can't take any credit for this that's been done, because it's all been done in a collaborative effort. I have not taken 1,000 children off the street and placed them through school, but I've been fortunate enough to be in a position where the resources were there and I just played that facilitative role. And so that's the excitement that comes from it. But again, when you look at it from a business aspect, you have to admire that, because that's a true risk and you see the rewards of it. And I think that's why it's I defer to my senior on the panel, because that's something that he's lived and that's something that he's experienced a little up closer than I would as it pertains to that.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so now I'm going to move on. And getting back to Mr. Edwards, I wanted to ask this question because I know you've been in business for many years. Tell me about your experience being a business owner, and I'm just going to keep it real, being a Black business owner and reaching out to potential customers, potential companies to market your product. What was that experience like for you?
Well, you know, first, you have to get your mind in gear when you're going and approaching people. You got to level your mind out. His or her attitude that I meet has nothing to do with anything. I better get my mind right, because I'm ready to talk to a person and I'm going there to sell my product. You know, people don't buy from people they don't like. So I have to like that person and I have to get that person to like me. So it starts with me. If I can get that person to like me, I'm going to sell it. If I can't get them to like me, I'm not going to sell them. Simple as that. So it's a hit and miss. My theory is the longer I go without a sale, the closer I am to one. See, somebody's going to buy. If you got a good product, somebody's going to buy. So you may canvas 10 businesses, 10 homes, 20 homes, may not get a sale. If you have a positive mental attitude and you keep going, you know, if you know you're the type of person that know how to take a licking and keep on ticking, then you're going to win. And that's what this is all about. That's what selling is all about. So the way I handle it is simply is that let's say from Mississippi, I know you're going to meet prejudiced people. In fact, quiet as it kept, as they say, I've seen more prejudices around Illinois than I saw in Mississippi. So it's here, it's everywhere, and we just got to deal with it in spite of. You know, I had a young man come to me one day. He says, how do you handle these mean people? I didn't write my business because it was too many mean people. And well, I said, what do you think during the 60s and the civil rights? You know, there were some real serious mean people. Now we're talking about 2019. It was last year he told me. I said, 2019, they're a lot better than they were then. And they got through it then. So we got to learn to take a licking and keep on ticking, keep on going, keep on pushing. Because if you present your best, I guarantee you, you're going to find some people, no matter what color they are, they're going to respect that, they're going to like that, and they're going to buy from you.
Thank you. And I have to agree with that. And not only in sales, but I've had that same experience in business and just dealing with people in general. In the beginning, there might have been some friction because of perceived differences, right, because that person didn't know me. And those, you know, walls just kind of came up. Well, this person looks different. This person is different from me. And I'm just not going to be accepting. But when you're confident about what you're doing, when you know what you know, and you're going to keep it professional, I find that is a way to win people over,
Exactly.
to at least respect you,
Right.
respect your expertise in whatever area it is in. So I totally agree with you. And I think it's very important that people sort of not so much, how can I say this? Not so much have those biases always, you know, as the filter for
Right.
interacting with people. Because let's face it, everybody has biases about something, someone, something. But I think that the whole thing that transcends all of that is when we have an open mind and we're receptive
Oh
to
yeah.
other people and other people's differences and being respectful of each other. I think that is so very important in this diversity and inclusion work. We don't have to all agree, we don't have to all be alike, but I need to appreciate you and your differences and the uniqueness of you. And I would like for you to appreciate me in the same way. And I think that's where diversity and inclusion is much more successful in some companies, communities, organizations, and we've seen it around the globe where people are working together. Mr. Byrd reflected on the movement that is going on now. There are people of all races, all genders, all persuasions, all of that, that are working together to promote justice and
Right.
equality. So I think that's very important. Yes, Mr. Byrd.
Frederick Douglass said, power can never concedes anything without a demand, and it never has and it never will. And so as nice as we'd like to be, I mean, some of our fellow citizens didn't have an opportunity to present themselves as being who they were before they were slain in the street. And so I know our conversation, it's like, it's kind of different, but it kind of plays in the same because, again, in business, you have people who who not necessarily fit these stereotypes, but who are viewed upon as being dangerous. And so I'm more interested from the space that I work from is not as changing the person's mind, but help raising their level of consciousness. And I see this taking place every day. And so again, I don't want to add too much credence because they do have it's a multi-generational, multinational movement that's taking place that are standing up for the rights of others. And so where I know there's a place for everything. And to me, outside the business context, the things that actually drive business is that we need to learn how to treat one another as human beings. And I don't think that that's rocket science. I don't think that we need any more experts to come up with any more theories, whether it be the standpoint theory or the whatever. It's just that people need to take a stand and do what's right, not talk about it, but actually do it. And so again, I hats off go to the business people because they're the one that's being mostly impacted by this COVID-19 as well as the protests. And it's making a big difference. I mean, boycotts and the protests are making these people rethink how they look at us. I mean, they're bringing down monuments that's been in our life since we've been conceived and we've learned to accept it, but it's unacceptable. So I get it. I'm all for business because if it wasn't for business, I mean, many of us wouldn't survive. I mean, we see that they couldn't get food from one place to another place. And so I think that there's some things that's happening in America that we can't, as individuals, pinpoint, but we can agree that change is taking place. And it appears to be positive because we haven't had this much movement since they brought us here.
Right.
Some of us came here willingly, and some of us came here in chains, okay? And so, but we all have the same objective, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And all I'm saying is that I'm interested in working with anybody who's interested in tearing down some of these barriers. We have a president in place right now who's talking about building the wall and you're gonna pay for it. Rhetoric. It's rhetoric and we buy into that and it's bait and switch. They have you looking one way when you should be focused on what's most essential. People are essential. Having the ability to raise their children is essential. Why should we have to have a different type of talk with an African-American male? I mean, the talk. That's absurd. But we as the people who are being marginalized and oppressed aren't the ones we should be seeking answers from. We should be having dialogue at a higher level, which is what's taking place right now in the Supreme Courts, in the Congress, in the Senate, and actually make a sustained effort. We need to be consistent. We don't need to feel like we've made certain progress and now we've accomplished. And no, this will probably be here, may not to this degree, but this will be a fight for our life and for our lifetime. Because the fact of the matter is, if we're looking at longevity, not so much for ourselves, but for our children and grandchildren, we want to leave them a better place than what we've inherited, okay? So there's a lot of good things taking place. Let's talk about how these, and I like to hear from our panelists who've been muted. I mean,
hang on, you have some questions, and this is a question that I was thinking and formulating in my head to ask, but Clarence Hawkins, hi Clarence, so glad to see you on here. So this is a question that Clarence had, and I'm gonna ask you, Mr. Byrd, starting off with you. How has COVID-19 affected business? Has it helped or hurt recruitment efforts? And has it helped with diversity and inclusion efforts? That's a triple loaded question. I can repeat it if you need it.
Well, I mean, it's actually shut businesses down. It's marginalized business opposed to some of the policies marginalizing people. And again, it has exposed the inequities, and it has created opportunities where we've identified things that are not necessarily working for us to work on improving those things. And so absolutely, I mean, this is unprecedented times we're living in right now. People are trying to find a way, just like we're doing right now. Generally, we would be meeting in a space where we could talk to one another. Now it's via video conferencing. And so with the recruitment efforts, I mean, I'm certain, because when I was manager of recruitment, we had a applicant tracking system, which is very impersonal, but it would streamline the applicant pool to the people who were considered the most qualified. And so you can pull from that. Now it's hard to identify who's the most qualified when you meet someone on video, opposed to having a series of interview processes. For example, phone screening, bring them to campus, meet with the senior leadership team, and different things like that. So COVID has prevented people to be able to come together, and it forced people to find other ways to come together, meet, and identify viable candidates, because it's still taking place. I mean, the employment rate, even though we still have unprecedented numbers, the employment rate is increasing, but then now we're having a setback because of the resurgence of COVID-19. And so right now, I couldn't really give you a comprehensive or a cohesive answer to that particular question, because things are still changing on a day-to-day basis. I mean, they just added 2 more states to our list here in Chicago that you would have to be quarantined if you've flown into. So for example, if you were looking to relocate, generally people are moving out of Chicago. That's unprecedented as well, and going back south. But in this particular environment, if you came from one of these hot states like Florida or Texas, you are expected to quarantine. And so I think it's having an adverse impact on recruitment and identifying viable employees.
Okay, Mr. Edwards, I'm gonna direct this question to you first. And this is from Michael. Hi, Michael. How do we overcome inequalities such as jobs, food deserts, and access to education and the internet?
How do we overcome it? That's wow, that's a big one there. You know, it seems like we're too deep into ourselves, in pursuit of success. I mean, we are really seriously deep into ourselves. To overcome something, it's going to take years. It's going to take some time. As I said, I started out with the idea that I was going to bring the corporate world back to this little city of Harvey and to put it frankly, I failed miserably. In fact, right now, 2020 is poorer than it was in 1969. Less business in 1969. You know, that ain't supposed to happen. That's not progress. But that's the Black community. That's the community without business. And so to bring it back is going to be, I think the first thing we have to think about is all the jobs that are available. You know, when they had rationing or they had gave jobs according to ethnic centricity, we have to look at how many jobs are being in that whatever the community is, and sort of spread the jobs across the board instead of just giving it to a selective few. It's who's in charge. That's what it comes down to. Only a selective few privileged people get the jobs, and we understand that. If you had a company and there were two people out looking for a job, you'll try to get the person that more resembles you. Well, you know, and that's a bad thing. That's the sad thing. That's where the sadness come in at, because if you own 90% of the business, that means you're going to hire 90% of the people that resembles you. How do you get past that? That's a hurdle. That's a hurdle to get past. And you know, we just got to look at individual and you know, good government. I think good government can help us get through that. Obviously, this year, this past 3 or 4 years, we've had some setbacks. We've had some setbacks because of bad government. We were on a little track of progress with Obama. Oh boy, excuse me. Obama. We were on a track of progress in spite of the fact that the economy was as bad as it was when he came into office. We had made some progress in diversity. Now, serious setback with Trump in office.
Thank you. Now there's another question, and Mr. Edwards, I'm going to direct this to you. Can your products be purchased on Amazon?
Yes, it is. It can. Amazon, eBay, all the.
Yeah, but what about your personal website?
And our personal website.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, we're going to shift just slightly, but this is a great conversation, and you all keep those questions coming. I will definitely direct them to our guest here today. I was looking at some research and looking at some things that work. Oh, before I go to that, here's another one, Mr. Edwards. Please add your website information to this forum. So if you can have your website typed into the chat where everybody can see that, you know, then they'll be able to get that information. And I can also share it after this event as well.
Okay, great.
Okay. Okay, so great social media influencer. Thank you, Clarence. You're giving some home run questions here. So thank you. Yes, we'll get that information to you. And just speaking along that line, there is Thomas Reuters, who produces an annual list of the top 1,000 most diverse and inclusive companies globally. And in looking at that list, some of the things that they look at to determine who they deem are the most diverse and inclusive organizations around the world, they look at environment, social and governance data, which Mr. Edwards just alluded to about government, but they also look at those things across the areas of diversity, inclusion, people development, and news controversy. And one of the American companies that is on this list is Gap Incorporated. So I was kind of curious, what is Gap doing that they are considered world leaders when it comes to diversity and inclusion. And I'm going to quote from this report, and it says that in addition to business resource groups and advisory boards designed to provide opportunities for cross-cultural learning, mentoring, and relationship building among employees, GAP has also launched Ascend. And Ascend is a program devoted to developing an inclusive, diverse workforce and a pipeline for future leaders. Ascend is designed to help minority leaders realize their potential and achieve their career aspirations through mentorship, building opportunity, and individual capability building. So in other words, GAP is doing a lot of things to help build and grow its workforce. And I think that that's very key. We have to empower people. And Mr. Edwards, you said that, you know, if people look different from us, sometimes we're hiring folks based on their look, not necessarily their skills, but if they look like us, or, you know, if they have the same, we perceive they have the same kind of beliefs and values that we have. Those are things that folks will hire for. And one of the things I learned years ago, people are not always hired because of the skill. You could teach a skill.
Right, yeah.
You can teach a skill. That's one of the least things that folks are hiring on. But these perceptions of this person looks like me, I'm African American, let me hire this person, or I'm female, I'm gonna hire this person. That's not always the best way to get people into an organization. I believe in growing people and building people's strengths. And when talking about capability building, sometimes I know we've all encountered individuals that didn't even know or didn't even believe that they could become leaders, and we've groomed them and worked with them, and now they're doing great things in leadership and in at the top of their fields. So I think that to be diverse is a numbers game, what I'm saying, but being inclusive, I think, is super important, because when we're inclusive, we're appreciating people for what they are, but we're also creating environments where those individuals can thrive and grow, whether they look like us or not. We provide those opportunities. So I think these are things that GAP is doing very well with its employees. So what do you all think? You have some comments?
I personally don't know enough about GAP and its functions. I know it's a clothing apparel store, but I don't know enough about it to really comment on it.
What about you, Mr. Byrd?
I'm not. I know they're trying to do a promotion with Kanye. He used to work there and everything. But I know there's so many other companies out there that are doing similar things, like, well, at least what we hear about Google and Apple and companies like that. I have a son that works for Apple, and they've been more than gracious throughout this whole COVID-19 pandemic, and have granted him the space, the time, and they've been supportive, even when, and so they have a lot of perks that back in the day, back in the B school, as they call it, that they said that would make a great company. And so a lot of these, they have companies who are utilizing these practices, these best practices. And again, it goes back to being plain and simple, as I stated earlier, what I noticed about Mr. Edwards. It's not about what you say, but how you make people feel. And that's about empowering people. You know, you want to do things that's going to build, that's going to add value to, you know. And so again, when we look at people from a different lens, and you look at a person from a standpoint of being this and expecting them to be that, I think that's where we run into the challenges. But there are a lot of great companies. I don't want to promote them too much until they start supporting us more. So I would give them a nice plug if they would contribute to your campaign. But be that as it may, there are a lot of companies. As a matter of fact, the reason why I invited, or I suggested to you to invite Mr. Edwards, because that's when you have someone who's actually embodied those principles, it says so much more than what a person could say. And it'll be great if you did this and allowed us this much vacation. And if we lived in France, we could kick back on the beach in the summertime. I mean, we have to do what works best for people in this society, a critical mass of people in this particular society. And the reason why we're having a conversation right now, because it's not taking place. And we've had movement particularly movement in the past, which is a foundation, that civil rights movement, but we have to take it to another level. It's about human rights, respecting human beings, dignity, and trying to just gain a better understanding of people, where they come from, and how we can respect them and support them in ways that's going to be conducive for the upliftment of everybody, at least as much as we possibly can. And so I don't know what I sound like, but that's what I feel. And I truly
100%.
believe that business is essential, because people who work, particularly people who work, they spend half their lives dedicated to a particular profession. Because if you put 8 hours a day at the least in, and then you spend an hour preparing, an hour winding down, and an hour in the process of commuting, that's
a lot of time.
pretty much half your life dedicated to that. And people are doing it, why? To raise their families, to sustain, you know, to the American dream needs to be realized. Not in the sense to where everybody have the same thing, because everybody do not have the same needs, wants, and desires. But there are barriers there. And I think that there are people here who are positioned to address, improve, and make this life experience, human experience better for the people around them. Because if we have to think about it, it really has a lot to do with circumstances. If we look at circumstances in a community, circumstances basically mean you're surrounded. Right. And so if your circumstances where you've been exposed to a business person who promotes positivity, your surroundings are conducive to your success. If you're in a community, somebody brought up food deserts. I was a part of these way back when, but we had a program called Chicago Fresh, where we realized that there were food deserts, and particularly and predominantly Black and brown communities. And so we had research going, we had finances and funding going to bring kids in to learn about science, to take a plot of land in a desolate place and make it beautiful, and teach, and then the community respected. And so they built principles around that. We went as far as establishing partnerships with Illinois Restaurant Association and some of the finer dining places, and they were interested in buying fresh produce. Now this thing is big.
It's taking off. Yeah.
It's blowing up, you know. And so what I'm saying is that there are things, and sometimes the change is incremental, and sometimes change have to be sweeping. And so it takes people time to develop systems in order to address some of these issues. Just like a business person, what they would do is start a business. I see people need jobs. People are unemployed. People are underemployed. I want to give people an opportunity to, so.
Okay, I see Mr. Chris White is on.
Yes.
Would you like to add some comments?
I would. I just wanted to add something real quick. I know our time is short and I joined late, but I'd like definitely to say that recruiting from a diverse pool of candidates means a more qualified workforce. And I can vouch for that. In the workforce where I work at American Airlines, we have a diverse group of individuals who come from all over the globe. And I talked with one individual who wrote an article, and let me share that with you guys. And this is paramount. She basically says she paid thousands of dollars to get her F1 visa application process, interviews done in the only U.S. embassy in her country, which is 8 hours away, and bring herself in time for the first day of school. She said she continuously pays double the normal tuition rate at school, after school, with no complaints. She says she pays thousands of dollars in taxes every year, knowing that I'm contributing positively to this country. In classes, says she makes sure that she shares her perspective and experience, the enriching the discussion and ultimately educating those who will never encounter someone with her background. She said she's been a tutor, mentor, and friend to countless Americans, ensuring their success in their classes in life. She said she came to this country to pursue a dream to change the world, yet every day it makes me feel like a burden and a strain on resources, despite the fact that she's paid for those resources more than twice over.
Wow.
And she basically is stating that someone coming from a country where it's poor, being a diverse individual who is trying to better herself and come to this country only to be, you know, pretty much turned away at every step and pay double for education to try to help this country. We need individuals like that that are hungry in the workforce. We need a diverse and inclusive, individual in every part of society that I can think of. And I think it's paramount that we pay attention to this a lot more. Now, like I said, I haven't been on the call long. I just happened on this website, and Todd Byrd is a friend of mine. We've known each other for 40 plus years. So, I mean, it piqued my interest right away. That's why I joined. And I wanted to add something to that. So I to learn a lot more about this so I can speak on this in a well-versed manner. Right now I'm kind of rambling, but I had a lot to say, and I jotted down some ideas, but it just caught my attention. So I'm going to talk with Todd after this call and see if I can gain some more insight and see if I can add to this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your contribution. And even though you were late, you really weren't late. Because anytime someone joins this conversation, I think it's at the right time. This has been an awesome experience, and we're wrapping up. We're about 3 minutes over, but I wanted to just let our panelists just sort of give a last word of wisdom, a word of advice on how we can promote diversity and inclusion in this country in order to roll back some of the blatant types of racism, discrimination, and social injustices that are going on in our workplaces, in our schools, in our communities. How can we as individuals move forward and to take an active role in circumventing some of the ills and things that are going on in this country now? Mr. Edwards, I'd like for you to start us off.
Okay, good. You know, the way we were promoted is that, everybody, we're self-driven. If we put something in our mind that we're going to do, we can do it. Never mind how long it takes. So I look at the people that I know around the country, and I feel real good that I can pick up a phone and call up a buddy of mine, Jeffrey Yip in Los Angeles, and say, let's go to dinner. And he and his wife and my wife we'll go to dinner. He's Japanese. I feel real good that I can call Florida and good friends and they're white. We can go to dinner. So we got to not just, that's something that you can talk about, but just be it. Just do it. Because the more you talk about it, the more you put the strangeness of it in existence. Just do it. And it'll come about. It'll come about. That's all I have to say on that subject.
All right, Mr. Byrd, what do you have to add to?
Well, my parting thoughts is one of someone else, Brene Brown, but Chris made me think about this. And so I think this is straightforward and to the point. In order to empathize with someone's experience, you must be willing to believe them as they see it and not how you imagine their experience to be.
Amen.
And so that's what I pulled from that. And again, having an HR background, Chris, he really just pulled it out. We have people from all around the world that has contributed to the greatness of this particular society. So with that being said, ideally, we see things the way we would like for them to be opposed to how they are. And Jim Collins had this book called From Good to Great. We have to face the brutal facts, and we have to be willing to put the work in. But above all, we do have to have an open mind and know that our way is not the only way, not necessarily the best way. Right. But at least we putting forth an effort. And if we continue to surround ourselves with people that are like people that are in this particular room right now, we'll continue to be successful, because we will continue to move things forward in the most positive and effective way that we possibly can. And that's what it's all about. I mean, that's why we're experiencing the benefits that we can say we're experiencing right now. So why wouldn't we want this for others? And thanks for sharing that story, Chris.
Thank you.
Because it really did crystallize it, and it made this quote more relevant than anything before. And it helped me bring my thoughts back in to focus. And so that's it. I'd like to hear parting thoughts from the rest of the panelists if time allows.
Sure. Who would like to?
I'll be real quick. Diversity and inclusion is a wave of the future. You have to think about it. I mean, back several years ago, I mean, if we can go back 10, 15, 20 years ago, you didn't hear much about diversity and inclusion, but it looks like the wave of the future, we're going towards that. And I would say to help that go along very well, vote. You have to vote in your local elections, statewide elections, as well as the presidential elections. We need to make sure that we have the right people in office that has the same mindset that we have on this panel right now to promote diversity and inclusion. And that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I have a comment. I just want to say that it's always been my philosophy in higher education and in life in general, with the old, very old cliche with a spin on it, is to treat others as you expect that they should treat you. However, the twist is that when we deal with people in whatever profession we work in, if we see the face of our loved one on their face, we'll give them that service. I want my child, when she sits across from someone in higher ed, to be treated as I would treat her. And I want your child to be treated as you would treat them, or your loved one, your friend, your family, your neighbor, your cousin, your niece, your auntie. So in life, period, we all have the diversity that I see us having amongst the humankind, is that we may look different, walk different, but we have a different background, a different experience, a different socioeconomic class, a different take on life, period. But if we just respect that difference is okay, and I'm still gonna treat you like you were my own, we'll all be fine. But so that's how I see diversity and inclusion. Include me, treat me as if I were one of your own, and we'll all be good.
That's very good, Oshanda.
Thank you, Oshanda. Anybody else like to add to the conversation?
Michael, unmute yourself.
Unmute yourself, Mike. Unmute.
You're still on mute.
Let me,
You
hang
should
on,
be
Michael.
able to unmute him, Pinky.
Oh,
Okay.
you're there. You're good.
There you go.
I was giving a thumbs up to Oshanda because for me, I made the transition, well, many, many years ago, if you can tell by the gray hair, from a business to higher education. And one of the things that I learned in business was from a manager whose philosophy was, I will treat you with respect, and I hope that I earn your respect. And I've tried to carry that through my entire life, personally and professionally. So sharing is caring.
Thank you. Thank you so very much.
Yes, sir.
Well, did I hear someone else have a comment?
No, I was just agreeing with Michael. That was very good. Thank you, sir.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I definitely want to keep that conversation going, but not only conversation, but let's take action, because I'm a firm believer that you could talk, but you have to put some legs to that talk.
Right.
You have to walk that talk, right, and reach out to people and, make things happen. And one of the young ladies that's on this call, Whitney Napoleon, and I wanted to give her a shout out. She has a company, WN Brand Innovators, And I have definitely worked with her, and I've seen a lot of her work. So if any of you want to develop or strengthen your brand, she can definitely help you with that. Her website is www.whitneynapoleon.com. It's in the comments. So hopefully you all can see those things there. If not, I will send that out. This has been a great conversation. I thank Mr. Edwards and Mr. Byrd for being on here with me. I do plan to do some more of these. I do plan to do some more of these in the very near future and bring some other viewpoints into the conversation about diversity and inclusion, because I think we really need to get this word out. And Chris White, yes, I would definitely do that.
Thank you.
So
All right.
we really want to get this out. And I know a lot of people signed up for this, and I think maybe they were trying to navigate. I know some people had some problems navigating over to this site, but I am going to share this on LinkedIn. So I'll upload it to LinkedIn where it can be seen. I'll see what the Facebook crowd is doing, but it's going to be in several places. I linked it with Twitter. So there will be a lot of places that this is going to be heard. Our shared voices are going to go forward to hopefully impact change in some small way, because it's just like water dripping on a big boulder. Over time, it breaks down. And I think if we keep putting these messages out there and we keep doing the work, over time, we're going to chip away, and this society is going to be less exclusive and more inclusive of everyone. So I thank you all for being here today. Thank the panelists. Thank you all who were able to join us today. And just stay tuned. We'll have more conversations like this. Thank you, Eric, so much. And we'll see you next time. So signing off.
Thank you, Dr. Stewart.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for organizing this. I appreciate it.
Yes.
I
Thank you.
appreciate you so much.
All right.
And Mr. Byrd, thank you as well.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Byrd. I appreciate it.
Okay, we
All
talk
right.
soon.
We'll talk soon.
Bye-bye. Take care.